most of you, you've learned this before, but most of you, you have some kind of strategy you use. Some people think of it as money, like I owe $10 and I have 8. Some people think of it as I have 10 little negatives. There's 10 there. Whoops. And 8 positives. And if I was to, did I put 10 here? No, I got 8 there. There we go. There's our 10 negatives. Okay? If I were to take those 5 and these 5, they cancel out. And that one cancels that one. It's like making pairs. Okay? And so I'm left with 2 negatives. So there's a couple ways to think of it. The answer here is -2. Some people like dealing with a number line. However you like to do it is great, as long as it's, I just plug it into a calculator. As long as you don't say that, all right? Because that's not, you want to start beginning, you want to begin to get efficient at this. Okay, so if I have 3 minus 10, if we're subtracting, we do what's called the 2 mark rule, or we add. We choose to add versus subtraction. Usually our mind works better in addition. So we're going to make this a plus and change that to a negative. So now we have 3 plus -10. That's the 2 mark rule, or writing it as a sum. How many have seen that before? Okay. What's the answer here? Yeah. -7. How many of you got -7? Okay, I have 3 positives and 10 negatives. I have 7 more negatives than I do positives. That's another way to think about it. Okay, once again, if there's no addition sign in between, go ahead and change one of them to addition. We're going to make that plus. And there's always how many marks? If I make one, I've got to make another. So there's 2 marks. So 3 plus 4 is 7. How many got that? Okay. So the goal is, if you're making mistakes with this, you'll want to go and try to practice some of these. Just write out some problems and give them a shot. If I have 2 negatives and 15 negatives, how many total negatives do I have?
17.
I have 17 negatives. You're counting up your negative signs. If I have 9 negatives and 4 negatives, volunteer, how many negatives? Yeah.
13.
What's that?
13.
13 negatives. 11 minus 2. We could make that into we could do the 2 mark rule, but hopefully we know 11 minus 2 is 9. But if you did the 2 mark rule, wrote it as a sum, that's 11 plus -2, which is still 9. -8 minus -12. Right here, we should write that as an addition problem, the 2 marks there. Notice the 2 marks always go between the numbers. So if I have 8 negatives and 12 positives, what do I have more of, positives or negatives? Yeah, Kyla? Positives. And how many more?
4.
4 more. So 4 positives. All right, number 10 here. 2 marks again. Okay. 13 negatives and 5 positives gives us a total of how many more negatives? Yeah?
8.
8 negatives. 8 more negatives. Okay. Any questions on those right there? How many have seen the 2 mark rule where you change that to a plus? Okay. You'll make it a little easier. Here I have negative and negative, so that gives me a total of 10 of them. Here I have more negatives than I do positives. I have 5 more. Here's our addition. Here they're complete opposites. Opposites always make 0. And here there's no addition sign, so I'm going to make that a plus, and I have to do another mark to counter that. So 6 plus 6 is 12. Okay. If you struggle with that, make sure you're asking, because it won't go away. We're just reviewing it today so you can you get it correct when we're dealing with equations. All right, so let's talk about our rules for multiplying and dividing. A negative times a negative. Now this is when we're multiplying and dividing. 2 negatives make a positive. 2 positives make a positive. So if the signs are the same, our answer is going to be positive. That's when we're multiplying. Okay, what if the signs are different? If I'm multiplying a positive by a negative or a negative by a positive, what do I get?
Negative.
A negative. If the signs are opposite or different, then our answer is negative. Okay? And that's the same thing as whether you're multiplying or if you're dividing. If I divide them, same thing happens. Okay? So, negative times a positive is? Negative. Negative what? 21. Negative times negative is? Positive. Negative divided by positive is? Negative. And in this case, that's 2. Positive divided by negative? And, okay. Any questions on that very quick review? Okay. Everyone rate themselves 1 to 5. 5, you got it? 1, you still struggle with it? Where you at? That's where you do this in your hand, up in the air. Boom, boom. Okay. Gives me a quick view of where we're at. All right. No halves, okay? I don't want half fingers. Okay. Very good. Okay. Hey, we are going to, you have your note page there. On your note page, I want you to get the, get our title down there. 3-1, Modeling and Solving Equations. There's a place for the page number, the section number, and the title. And then if you, on the left, if you look at where it says Main Ideas, you'll write Learning Goals, and then under the Notes section, you'll actually write down your learning goals there. So those are what we're going through today. We're going to solve one-step equations and use equations to solve those real-world problems. Filling out your note page correctly, you put your name, you put your book section, 3-1, what page you'd find it on your textbook, the date, and the title, that's all up here. You write your learning goals here, and then to solve one-step equations, to use equations to solve real-world problems. Okay, that's information that you can look at and go, okay, that's what we did on that lesson. When you're setting for your quiz or your test, you could easily go back and check that out. Okay, so for today, we're going to go through a few different problems. We're not going to actually do this whole note deal, but what I'd like you to do is take a look at problem number 2. And this is on page 108. Okay, so on page 108, good morning. There.
This is Ayla. Read.
Oh, okay. Ayla, why don't you have a seat right back here by Chelsea there. So we're going to go on, we're going to list on this side, we'll write page 108, examples. And then over here is where you list your problem numbers. All right? So we're going to do problem 2 here. Hey, what's the inverse operation for subtraction? Use it to, use this operation to solve that. Does anyone know what an inverse operation is? Yeah.
Where you like divide 26 by 14?
Not divide in this case, but division is the inverse of multiplication. So in this case, if I have the problem a minus 14 equals negative 26, if you're trying to get that variable by itself, you have to get rid of what? Bobby, what do you need to get rid of here? You know? Okay, well here, everyone write that down right now. Write that equation down. Yeah.
Don't you want to get rid of like the negative?
Maybe. Yeah. Okay, I want everyone to draw this line right here. Okay, now we've broken that equation into 2 different parts. We've broken it into the a minus 14 and the negative 26. Those are equal parts. If I want to get the a all by itself, Jaden, what do you think?
Subtract 14.
I've got to move that 14, and the inverse of subtracting 14, which is what they're doing, is we want to add 14. Okay, so we're going to add 14 to both sides. And we leave a trail of our work like that. All right, and I know that many of you can just do these in your head right now, and that's okay. But the goal is when we have a 5-6 step equation, I want you to know how to show the steps. So that's what I'm asking you to do right now, trying to get you to practice that. Okay, so I have a minus 14 equals negative 26. I'm taking negative 14 and adding 14 to it. Negative 14 and 14 is? It's 0. Good. Okay, and I'm left with what on this side of the equation? A. Negative 26 and 14. What do I have more of, positives or negatives? Negatives. How many more negatives?
12.
12 more negatives. So my answer is negative 12. We didn't even need a calculator for it. Dude. Impressive. Okay. Any questions there? All right, guys, you should know that I call on people randomly. And sometimes it's because you're not doing what you're supposed to, and sometimes it's just because I need volunteers. And that's how I get them quickly. So like when I called on Bobby a minute ago, Bobby wasn't doing anything wrong. I just needed a volunteer, and I happen to know Bobby's name. Well done, Bobby. Nice. All right. Number 3, we're going to solve these mentally this time. So I want you to tell your neighbor the answers to these problems, A, B, and C. The problems, it says solve each equation by finding opposites. This says the opposite of x. Now some of you go, that says negative x. Well, negative x and the opposite of x mean the same thing. Okay, so one way of reading this is the opposite of x. The opposite of x is 7. So what's x? TT?
Negative 7?
Yeah, it's negative 7. Really mathematically, all that's going on there, so if I'm writing this on my paper, and I wanted to, I'd have number 3 now, and I don't have to write every problem down, and sometimes I'm just summarizing what I've learned. So like up here, maybe I'd annotate, hey, I added 14 because they were subtracting 14, if that's something you struggled with. Some of you already knew that. Okay, like right here, I'm going to show that this really right out in front of that x is a negative 1. And that says negative 1 times x equals 7. So I don't want you to think like it's hocus pocus or magic or anything. Mathematically, what's happening is I'm doing the inverse operation of multiplication. I'm multiplying x by negative 1. What's the opposite of multiplying by negative 1? It's dividing by negative 1. The opposite of multiplication is division. They undo each other. Okay, so if I divide this side by negative 1, whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. Okay, that's kind of a rule there. You haven't heard that before. Divide this by negative 1. Well, what's a negative divided by a negative? Positive. This becomes positive x. And what's positive divided by negative? Negative. So that becomes negative 7. So as TT pointed out, the answer is negative 7. Okay, and the way that works, you just, you know, if you see, this says do it mentally. If you see this opposite, it just means you flip the sign on the other side. So whatever the other side is, it becomes the opposite. So I'm going to make that positive, which makes that positive. So y equals 2. I'm going to make this positive, which makes that negative. So z equals negative 5. Mathematically, you're really just dividing both sides by negative 1. But that's kind of a shortcut there. Okay, so 5 equals z. And notice that it's okay to have 5 equals z and not z equals 5. You don't have to switch the variable over. It's okay to leave it like this. And notice my z looks really cool. It's like a super z because it has a cool thing in the middle.
I do that with 7.
Yeah. Why would I do that?
So we know it's not.
Yeah.
To know that it's not like an S or something.
2.
Yeah, it doesn't look like a 2 then, right? I put that, I'm like, oh, dude, that's a z. Okay. Any questions there? All right. How many of you have notes that are looking pretty good? Show off your notes to your neighbor. Say, look at my notes. They're amazing.
They're all lined up.
Bobby, can you see better there? Nice. Okay, here we go. Let's take a look at this next part here. This is number 4. This is on page 109, by the way. Page 109. The only reason you'd write these things down in your notes is that later on, like if I'm studying for my test and I have this sheet in front of me, and a lot of times we have definitions we're putting in and different things, but in this case, if I go, man, I really need to learn a little more about this, I know what page number to reference back to. And having this section just allows us to do a quick check of everything. Okay, so some page 109 examples. It says, use mental math to solve each equation. Mental math, all right. Well, if I'm using mental math here, 4 times what is 12? 3. So A equals 3. Negative 2 times what is 20? Well, first, I went from a negative to a positive, so this has to be a negative. So our answer is negative what? What times 2 is 20? 10. What divided by 6 is 5? Trinity says 30. Yeah. Yeah, n equals 30. Okay. How many can do those in your head? Good. I want you to tell your neighbor what you did to do that in your head. Like, how did you get that answer? What did you do right here to get A equals 3? Go for it.
You just divide 4. Or you could do what he did. and-
All right. Ryan, what do you think? What do you do?
Pretty much what I did was found out like 12. For the first one I did like 4 times 3 is pretty much 12.
So you said 4 times what is 12, and you said 4 times 3 is 12. Okay. Anyone do something different? So mathematically what's happening is you're multiplying this by 4. How do we undo multiplication? Divide. So like what Ryan said, Ryan goes, well, 4 times 3 is 12, so that's how I knew that. Well, really what he's doing is he's using multiplication to divide. Okay, our brains work a little easier to multiply rather than divide, but mathematically you're just dividing that 12 by 4 to get 3. Here they're multiplying by negative 2. Mathematically, if you divide both sides by negative 2, you get negative 10. Here, they're dividing by 6. That's what that line means, divide. What's the opposite of divide? Multiply. So here, they're multiplying both sides by 6. These cancel. I'm left with n, and that gives me 30. So you're just doing the inverse, the opposite operation. Okay. Any questions there? Sometimes it's nice to be able to check our answer. It's always nice, especially if you want to know if you got 100% on a quiz before you turn it in. Is negative 16 a solution to that? Explain. Yes or no? Go ahead and figure that out and then explain to your neighbor why or why not. Who says, yep, that's an answer? Who says, nope, that's not an answer? Why is it not an answer? Keegan?
Because negative 16 times negative 3 is equal negative 48,
What's it equal?
positive 48.
Yeah, a negative times a negative makes a positive. So if this is a negative and that's a negative, then that means this thing has to be a positive. It can't be negative. So nope, it's not. Plugged it in and it doesn't work out. Negative 3 times, if we plug in that negative 16, does not equal 48. Okay, so we have that not equal sign there. Okay. I think we're good to go. All right. What I'd like you to do right now is take a look at your notes. Now, I haven't finished up mine. And look at the very bottom. There's a place where it says summary at the end of class or at home. That's always a place I like if you do it at home. That way, tonight when you're going through, do I have homework in English? No. Spanish? No. Math? No, but I did learn this, and you write down what you learned. That just helps you to quickly recall what you've learned. And I know that's not always when you're watching SpongeBob, it's hard to pause and write that down. However, it's part of a learning process. It's practicing what you learned by thinking through it. You're actually putting some mental effort in. Okay, right now I'm going to give you your assignment. I want you to take a look at it and let me know if you have questions.